Section 21 of Gray's Anatomy, Part 5. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Mark Roche. Anatomy of the Human Body, Part 5, by Henry Gray. Chapter 2H. The Large Intestine. Intestinum crassum. The large intestine extends from the end of the ileum to the anus. It is about 1.5 meters long, being 1/5 of the whole extent of the intestinal canal. Its caliber is largest at its commencement at the cecum, and gradually diminishes as far as the rectum, where there is a dilation of considerable size just above the anal canal. It differs from the small intestine in its greater caliber, its more fixed position, its sacculated form, and in possessing certain appendages to its external coat, the appendices epiploici. Further, its longitudinal muscular fibers do not form a continuous layer around the gut, but are arranged in 3 longitudinal bands, or tinii. The large intestine, in its course, describes an arch which surrounds the convolutions of the small intestine. It commences in the right iliac region, in a dilated part, the cecum. It ascends through the right lumbar and hypochondriac regions to the under surface of the liver. It here takes a bend, the right colic flexure, to the left, and passes transversely across the abdomen on the confines of the epigastric and umbilical regions, to the left hypochondriac region. It then bends again, the left colic flexure, and descends through the left lumbar and iliac regions to the pelvis, where it forms a bend called the sigmoid flexure. From this it is continued along the posterior wall of the pelvis to the anus. The large intestine is divided into the cecum, colon, rectum, and anal canal. The cecum, intestinum cecum, the commencement of the large intestine, is the large blind pouch situated below the colic valve. Its blind end is directed downward, and its open end upward, communicating directly with the colon, of which this blind pouch appears to be the beginning, or head, and hence the old name of caput cecum coli was applied to it. Its size is variously estimated by different authors, but on an average it may be said to be 6.25 centimeters in length and 7.5 in breadth. It is situated in the right iliac fossa, above the lateral half of the inguinal ligament. It rests on the iliacus and psoas major, and usually lies in contact with the anterior abdominal wall, but the greater omentum and, if the cecum be empty, some coils of small intestine may lie in front of it. As a rule, it is entirely enveloped by peritoneum, but in a certain number of cases, 5% vary, the peritoneal covering is not complete, so that the upper part of the posterior surface is uncovered and connected to the iliac fascia by connective tissue. The cecum lies quite free in the abdominal cavity and enjoys a considerable amount of movement, so that it may become herniated down the right inguinal canal, and has occasionally been found in an inguinal hernia on the left side. The cecum varies in shape, but according to Treves, in man it may be classified under one of 4 types. In early fetal life it is short, conical, and broad at the base, with its apex turned upward and medialward toward the iliocolic junction. It then resembles the cecum of some monkeys, e.g. Mangabey monkey. As the fetus grows, the cecum increases in length more than in breadth, so that it forms a longer tube than in the primitive form, and without the broad base, but with the same inclination of the apex toward the iliocolic junction. This form is seen in other monkeys, e.g. the spider monkey. As development goes on, the lower part of the tube ceases to grow, and the upper part becomes greatly increased, so that at birth there is a narrow tube, the vermiform process, hanging from a conical projection, the cecum. This is the infantile form, and as it persists throughout life in about 2% of cases, it is regarded by Treves as the first of his 4 types of human ceca. The cecum is conical, and the appendix rises from its apex. The 3 longitudinal bands start from the appendix and are equidistant from each other. In the second type, the conical cecum has become quadrate by the growing out of a saccule on either side of the anterior longitudinal band. These saccules are of equal size, and the appendix arises from between them, instead of from the apex of a cone. This type is found in about 3% of cases. The third type is the normal type of man. Here, the two saccules, which in the second type were uniform, have grown at unequal rates, the right with greater rapidity than the left. In consequence of this, an apparently new apex has been formed by the growing downward of the right saccule, and the original apex, with the appendix attached, is pushed over to the left toward the ileocolic junction. The three longitudinal bands still start from the base of the vermiform process, but they are now no longer equidistant from each other, because the right saccule has grown between the anterior and posterolateral bands, pushing them over to the left. This type occurs in about 90% of cases. The fourth type is merely an exaggerated condition of the third. The right saccule is still larger, and at the same time the left saccule has become atrophied, so that the original apex of the cecum, with the vermiform process, is close to the ileocolic junction, and the anterior band courses medialward to the same situation. This type is present in about 4% of cases. The vermiform process, or appendix, processus vermiformis, is a long, narrow, worm-shaped tube, which starts from what was originally the apex of the cecum, and may pass in one of several directions: upward behind the cecum, to the left behind the ilium and mesentery, or downward into the lesser pelvis. It varies from 2 to 20 centimeters in length, its average being about 8.3 centimeters. It is retained in position by a fold of peritoneum, mesenteriole, derived from the left leaf of the mesentery. This fold, in the majority of cases, is more or less triangular in shape, and as a rule extends along the entire length of the tube. Between its two layers, and close to its free margin, lies the appendicular artery. The canal of the vermiform process is small, extends through the whole length of the tube, and communicates with the cecum by an orifice which is placed below and behind the ileocecal opening. It is sometimes guarded by a semilunar valve formed by a fold of mucous membrane, but this is by no means constant. Structure. The coats of the vermiform process are the same as those of the intestine: serous, muscular, submucous, and mucous. The serous coat forms a complete investment for the tube, except along the narrow line of attachment of its mesenteriole in its proximal 2/3. The longitudinal muscular fibers do not form three bands, as in the greater part of the large intestine, but invest the whole organ, except at 1 or 2 points where both the longitudinal and circular fibers are deficient, so that the peritoneal and submucous coats are contiguous over small areas. The circular muscle fibers form a much thicker layer than the longitudinal fibers, and are separated from them by a small amount of connective tissue. The submucous coat is well marked, and contains a large number of masses of lymphoid tissue, which cause the mucous membrane to bulge into the lumen, and so render the latter of small size and irregular shape. The mucous membrane is lined by columnar epithelium, and resembles that of the rest of the large intestine, but the intestinal glands are fewer in number. The colic valve, valvula coli, ileocecal valve. The lower end of the ileum ends by opening into the medial and back part of the large intestine, at the point of junction of the cecum with the colon. The opening is guarded by a valve consisting of 2 segments or lips, which project into the lumen of the large intestine. If the intestine has been inflated and dried, the lips are of semilunar shape. The upper one, nearly horizontal in direction, is attached by its convex border to the line of junction of the ileum with the colon. The lower lip, which is longer and more concave, is attached to the line of junction of the ileum with the cecum. At the ends of the aperture, the 2 segments of the valve coalesce, and are continued as narrow membranous ridges around the canal for a short distance, forming the frenula of the valve. The left or anterior end of the aperture is rounded, the right or posterior is narrow and pointed. In the fresh condition,